Emotional day in court as a Maple Heights man was sentenced for the deadly shooting of his girlfriend outside a Bedford AutoZone last year. Darian Hobley was sentenced today for the death of 20-year-old Riley Jones in what the judge described as a tragic case. Natalie Clydesdale has more from this emotional hearing.
I did what I heard.
Through tears, 22-year-old Darian Hobley apologized in court for killing his on-again, off-again girlfriend, Riley Jones.
I want you to picture something for a moment. It's a regular Tuesday morning. The sun is up. People are going to work, stopping for coffee, running errands. Nothing about the morning of August 4th, 2025, would have looked unusual to anyone driving past Broadway Avenue in Bedford, Ohio. It was just another day in a quiet suburban town outside Cleveland. But somewhere in that ordinary morning, something was already going very wrong. Riley Jones was 20 years old. She lived in Shaker Heights, Ohio, a neighborhood that sits just a short drive from Bedford. She was young, she had people who loved her, and by every account that came out after her death, she had a life that mattered to a lot of people. Friends remembered her. Family mourned her. Candles were lit in her honor. Online, people wrote the kinds of things you write when someone is taken too soon, words about how bright she was, how much she meant, how the world felt smaller without her. And on that Tuesday morning, Riley was not alone. She was with a man named Darian Hobley. He was 22. He lived in Maple Heights, another suburb nearby. The two of them knew each other. They had a relationship. The kind of relationship that, at some point, had probably felt like something good. But by August 4th, whatever was between them had turned into something painful, something loud, something dangerous. By the time the two of them arrived at the AutoZone parking lot on Broadway Avenue, they were already deep in an argument. That argument had not started in Bedford. It had started back in Maple Heights, and it traveled with them, riding in the car, filling up the space between them with tension and anger. When they pulled into that parking lot, the fight did not stop. It kept going. And here is what makes this moment so hard to sit with. There was nothing about that parking lot that was supposed to be dangerous. It was a car parts store. There were employees inside. There were security cameras. It was broad daylight. People walked in and out of that store every single day without anything happening. It was the kind of place you stop at quickly and then keep moving with your life. Riley Jones did not get to keep moving with her life. What happened in that parking lot on a Tuesday morning changed everything for her family, for his family, for the people who witnessed it, and for the community that would spend months trying to make sense of it. And I want to take you through this story the way it actually happened, step by step, because every part of it matters. This is not just a story about a shooting. This is a story about two young people, a relationship that broke down, a gun that should never have been there, and the kind of split-second moment that cannot be undone no matter how much everyone involved wishes it could be. Let's start from the beginning. Before we talk about what happened in that parking lot, we need to talk about the two people who were in it. Because when tragedies like this make the news, names appear in headlines and court documents, and it becomes easy to forget that those names belong to real human beings with full lives behind them. Riley Jones was 20 years old, and she was from Shaker Heights, Ohio. Shaker Heights is a well-known suburb of Cleveland, tree-lined streets, close-knit neighborhoods, the kind of place where people know their neighbors. Riley grew up in that world. She had family. She had friends who cared about her. After she died, her community showed up for her. People organized memorials. GoFundMe pages were created to support those she left behind. Her sister would later stand in a courtroom and speak about what it meant to lose her, not as a name in a news story, but as a real person, a sister, someone who sat across from her at dinner and called her on ordinary days just to talk. We do not know every detail of Riley's life from public reporting. We know she was young. We know she was loved. And we know she had a relationship with Darian Hobley that, on the morning of August 4th, 2025, was falling apart in the worst possible way. Darian Hobley was 22 years old, from Maple Heights, Ohio. Maple Heights is another Cleveland suburb, not far from Shaker Heights. In some ways, these two young people came from similar worlds, close to each other geographically, similar in age, brought together at some point by whatever it is that brings two people together. What we know about Darian before that morning is actually important to the legal story that came later. According to court records and statements made during sentencing, Darian had no significant criminal history before August 4th. His mother would stand in that courtroom months later and describe him as a first-time offender. That fact did not erase what happened. But it is part of who he was before that day changed the course of his life too. At his sentencing, Darian spoke. He apologized to Riley's family. He told the court he never meant to hurt her. He said that after the shooting, he left because everything felt overwhelming, because he needed, in his own words, a new scenery. Those are words that tell you something about the state of a 22-year-old who had just done something that could not be taken back. They are not words that explain it, but they are honest in a raw, unpolished kind of way. The judge who sentenced Darian was direct. He said that young people should not be carrying weapons. He called the whole situation tragic. And it was. Both of these young people, one who lost her life and one who will spend years of his in prison, were at the start of their lives. Whatever they were to each other before August 4th, neither of them could have imagined where that relationship would end up. That is what makes this so heavy. Not just the violence, but the weight of two young lives, connected to each other, destroyed by one uncontrolled moment. Arguments between people who are close to each other have a way of taking on a life of their own. They start somewhere small, a word said wrong, a feeling that built up too long, and then they grow. They follow you from room to room. They get in the car with you. And sometimes, if nothing interrupts them, they lead somewhere nobody planned to go. That is what appears to have happened on the morning of August 4th, 2025, with Riley Jones and Darian Hobley. The argument between them was already happening before they ever reached Bedford. It started back in Maple Heights, Darian's hometown. Whatever was being said between them in those moments before they got in the car and drove, it was serious enough to carry. It moved with them down those suburban roads, past those familiar Ohio neighborhoods, all the way to the AutoZone parking lot on Broadway Avenue. When they arrived, the cameras were already rolling. The store had surveillance equipment, and it caught what followed in the parking lot. What that footage showed was a confrontation that was not one-sided in the way people sometimes imagine these things. According to what emerged in court, Riley pulled her car into that lot and blocked Darian's vehicle. That is not the action of someone who wanted the situation to end. That is the action of someone who is not ready to let it go, who still had something to say, who is not walking away. We need to be careful here because it would be wrong to use that detail to blame Riley Jones for what happened to her. She did not deserve what happened to her. A blocked car is not a reason to shoot someone. But understanding her actions helps us understand how desperate and intense this moment had already become. This was not a calm disagreement. This was two people who were hurting, who were angry, who had a gun between them, whether they both knew it or not. The argument in that parking lot escalated. Witnesses who were nearby could see that something was very wrong. The cameras kept recording. And then came the moment that would define everything that followed. Riley Jones got out of her car, walked to Darian's vehicle, and opened his driver's side door. Think about what that moment looks like. She walked toward him. She opened the door.
She leaned in.
We do not know exactly what she said in those final seconds.
We do not know what he said back.
What we know is that within seconds of that door opening, a single gunshot was fired. The bullet struck Riley Jones in the chest. She collapsed in that parking lot. On a Tuesday morning, in front of a car parts store, with cameras watching and people nearby who could do nothing fast enough to help her. The argument was over, but in the worst way imaginable. Darian Hobley would later claim in court that Riley had reached for the gun. That claim became part of the legal conversation that followed. But in that parking lot, in that moment, none of that legal language existed yet. There was only a young woman on the ground, a young man with a gun, and a silence that no one who witnessed it would ever fully forget. After the gunshot, the world seemed to stop for a moment, and then it moved very fast. Darian Hobley did not run immediately. He walked into the AutoZone store. He told the employees inside to call 911. And then he walked back out the door and left the scene on foot. That detail has always stood out to me. He went in and told them to call for help. And then he walked away anyway. He said later that everything felt overwhelming, that he needed a new scenery. And maybe that is true. But walking away from a woman you just shot in a parking lot is something that the law, and the people who loved Riley, would remember. He did not get far. Police arrived quickly after the 911 call came in. They found Riley Jones unresponsive on the ground. Emergency medical services transported her to a nearby hospital, where she was pronounced dead. And within a short time, Darian Hobley was found and arrested approximately 1 block away from the AutoZone. When they took him into custody, he had blood on his clothing. The investigation moved quickly from there. Detectives collected the surveillance footage from the AutoZone cameras. They gathered witness statements from people who had seen the confrontation, including one witness who told 911 dispatchers that they saw Hobley standing over the victim with a gun. The firearm itself was recovered. Some reports identified it as a ghost gun, a weapon that is privately assembled with no serial number, making it untraceable through law enforcement databases. That detail added another layer of gravity to the case because it meant the weapon had been obtained and built outside of the legal system that is supposed to track these things. In August 2025, a Cuyahoga County grand jury returned an indictment against Darian Hobley on 3 charges: murder, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. He appeared in court and entered a plea of not guilty. Bond was set. The legal process, slow and methodical by nature, began to move. For Riley's family, those months between the shooting and the final court date must have felt unbearable. They were waiting for justice in a process that speaks in legal terms and moves on its own timeline, regardless of how much pain sits on the other side of it. They had to attend hearings. They had to wait for discovery. They had to watch Darian Hobley appear in court and claim he did not do what everyone had seen on camera. And then on February 2nd, 2026, 6 months after Riley Jones was shot in that Bedford parking lot, something shifted. Darian Hobley changed his plea. He pleaded guilty, not to murder, but to involuntary manslaughter and tampering with evidence. The prosecution agreed to the deal. The murder charge was dropped. The defense had argued that Riley reached for the gun during the confrontation, which shaped how the charge was framed legally. Whether or not that argument held full weight, the outcome was a reduced charge and a sentencing range that would now define what came next. For anyone watching from the outside, it can be hard to understand how a shooting that killed someone ends in a manslaughter plea rather than a murder conviction. But that is how the American legal system works. Intentions matter. Agreements are made, and charges are shaped by what can and cannot be proven to a jury's satisfaction. It does not always feel like enough, but it is the process. February 24th, 2026. 6 months and 20 days after Riley Jones was shot in that AutoZone parking lot, Darian Hobley stood before a judge in a Cuyahoga County courtroom to receive his sentence. The room was filled with people who had been carrying the weight of August 4th since the day it happened. Riley's family was there. Darian's family was there. And in that courtroom, before the sentence was read, people were given the chance to speak. Riley's sister stood up and talked about loss. She talked about what it means to lose someone suddenly, without warning, without a goodbye. She talked about betrayal, the kind of pain that comes not just from grief, but from knowing that the person who took your loved one was someone your loved one knew and trusted. That kind of loss sits differently. It is not just about the violence. It is about the broken trust underneath it. Darian's mother also spoke. She acknowledged the tragedy. She told the court that her son had no prior criminal record, that before August 4th, he had not been in trouble with the law. She was not excusing what happened. She was a mother trying to speak honestly about who her son had been before this moment consumed him. And then Darian himself spoke. He apologized to Riley's family. He said he never intended to hurt her. He explained his decision to leave the scene by saying that everything was overwhelming, that he needed a new scenery. There was no dramatic speech, no complicated legal language, just a 22-year-old man in a suit, standing in a courtroom, knowing that no words were going to change what he had done. The judge sentenced Darian Hobley to 8 to 10.5 years in prison. The judge spoke too, directly and plainly. He said that young people should not be carrying weapons. He called what happened tragic. And he was right on both counts. A young person had a gun they should not have had, in a situation that was already dangerous enough without it, and a life ended because of it. 8 to 10.5 years. That is the legal outcome. That is what the courts determined. For some people, it will feel like justice. For others, especially those who loved Riley Jones, it will feel like a number on a page that does not come close to capturing what was lost. Because here is what no sentence can account for. Riley Jones was 20 years old. She had her whole life in front of her. She woke up on the morning of August 4th, 2025, and drove to Bedford, Ohio, caught in an argument that she was not willing to walk away from. And she never came home. There are still things we do not fully know about this story. We do not know the full history of their relationship. We do not know every word that was spoken in that parking lot. We do not know what Riley was feeling in her final moments, or what Darian was thinking in his. What we do know is this. Somewhere in Bedford, Ohio, on a Tuesday morning, in a place as ordinary as a car parts store, a 20-year-old woman lost her life. And an entire community, her family, his family, the people who witnessed it, the city that woke up to the news, was never quite the same again. If you take anything from this story, let it be this. Arguments can wait. Weapons do not belong in moments of anger. And no relationship, no matter how much pain is inside it, is worth someone's life. Rest in peace, Riley Jones. You deserved so much more than this. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, hit that like button, and turn on notifications for more crimes videos.